Hello everyone, this is the Gadget Man with Discovering in Color, and welcome to today's video. And today we're going to talk about how to stay warm in one of these right here now that it's the winter time. And what I'm going to do, I want to break this up into a couple of different segments. The first segment, we're just going to actually talk about the type of tent you should use when it's cold. The second type, we're going to talk about as far as sleeping bags, sleeping pads. Third part we're going to talk about is going to be about pretty much about hand warmers. That's a quick one there. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is actual body insulation and what I wear when I go camping in the cold. So this is just a video of what I do. You can do whatever you want, but I found that these techniques that I use have worked very well over time, and hopefully they should work really good for you. So let's talk about the first one. All right, the first thing that we want to talk about is tents, specifically the type of tent that you want to use when it's cold outside. As far as backpacking goes, you want to go with a small tent. That also goes with car camping. You don't want a really big tent. And the reason you don't want a really big tent is that you just have more air inside of that tent. With a small tent, it's significantly smaller. If you have more than one person inside, you've got a lot better chance of it being just a few degrees warmer than what it is outside. The other thing about a tent that you want to keep in mind is I like tents that have, in the wintertime, very little mesh on the inside. This particular one here is a single wall tent, so it could have a little condensation going on inside, but it doesn't leave a lot of room for wind and breeze, just like we have out here today. It doesn't leave a lot of time or space for that to kind of flow up underneath and take away all of your warm air that you might have built up on the inside. So if you get those tents that are really meshy, have a lot of mesh on the inside, and just have a rain fly on the outside, well, those are going to be cooler because you're just going to let air escape. Cold air in, and whatever warm air you have is just going to go flush out. So when it comes to tents, smaller is better. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is actual sleeping bags and sleeping pads. So this is actually one of the setups I use when it's pretty daggone cold outside. And I use this a lot for car camping, not so much as backpacking, but I will show you that setup, what I do here in just a minute. So here's what I do. First off, I've got a good pad. And I did a video on sleeping pads, and we'll put that little link up here to that. But you got to have a good pad in the cold. And not all pads are equal. Some have more insulation than others. This actually Thermarest one I have right here, it's got some pretty good insulation. So you want to make sure that you look at what the weather is, where you're going, and bring yourself a good pad. Because if you don't have a good pad, what will happen is the ground's normally cold. And they have a thing what they call conduction. So basically what will happen is if you don't have the proper pad to provide you that insulation off the ground will actually suck the heat right out of your body. So make sure you have a really good pad. Next thing you want to do is you want to make sure you have the proper sleeping bag for your conditions. I've got a number of bags that go from 0 degrees all the way up to almost 50 degrees. What I do, because I sleep cold, so what I do is when I'm going someplace, and depending on what the temperature is going to be, I'll pull out the bag I need, and a lot of times I will bring 2 bags. So what I've got right here is I've actually got a bag inside of another bag. And what I'll do is I will sleep with inside of this bag here, and then I'll climb inside this second bag right here, which is actually rated at a higher rating than what this smaller bag here is. And I found that keeps me very, very, very warm. And it's just a great way to go. And if I have to get up in the middle of the night to grab something or do something, what happens is I unzip the outer bag and I'm still in the inner bag. So I can get up and get a drink of water, or if I have to go to the bathroom or do something like that. This actual Sierra Design mummy bag here is actually designed to open up at the bottom, and it's got little armholes here on the side, and I've done a review on that. And it's actually got armholes here. So you can actually get out of this bag, take care of whatever you got to take care of, and get back in, and you won't be that cold at all. It helps retain some of that heat. Then you hop back inside, zip it all back up, and you're good to go. If you find yourself getting too hot, well, then you can just open up the outer bag and keep the inner bag closed. So there's a lot of options here. This one actually does have a hood, and very rarely do I actually sleep with my head inside of both hoods. Usually I'll have this one hood out and I won't have this hood on, but there's been a couple times where it's been a little colder than I thought, and I did have to put my head inside. But you'll find that if you do that, you just got to be careful because you can get too hot in a situation like this. All right. Then the next part goes, what if you're backpacking and weight is consideration and room is consideration inside of your pack? Well, you may not want to bring 2 sleeping bags. Well, what I do then is I bring 1 sleeping bag for the conditions, and then what I'll do is I'll bring a separate quilt. This one here is a pretty light quilt. And what I'll do is I'll bring this with me, and it does a couple of things. First off, I can put it over top of me when I'm sleeping, just like this right here, without the wind. But now what it is I basically got a second sleeping bag that's over top of me, and that helps a lot with the insulation. I don't have all the extra weight and all the extra bulk that I would have with taking 2 sleeping bags, but I also get all the extra warmth that I need. And this one right here is rated for about 45 or so degrees, so it does a pretty good job of adding extra insulation. It's also nice because if I'm sitting outside by a campfire at night, I can just pull this out and wrap it around me, and I've got a nice little layer if it's cool outside to help with whatever insulation I happen to have on. Next up, hand warmers and body warmers. These things are really great to use as a supplement to what you have right here. They can keep you pretty warm at night. I like to start with this body warmer here, and this is the big one. They call it a super warmer. It's the old Hot Hands or whatever you want to get. And what I do is I take this out right here and mush it up, do what I got to do, and I take it and I shove it all the way down to the bottom of the sleeping bag where my feet are. And you'll be amazed at how this warmer right here will keep your feet warm all night long. So that's step one that I'll do. Step number 2 that I'll do is I've got these smaller ones here, and these are pretty good for just putting them maybe around you if you want, and you can use as many as you want. Sometimes I'll use 1, maybe 2, kind of depends on what I've got going on. I'll also take these sometimes and I will put them next to my cell phone or whatever battery powered equipment I have, whether it be inside my bag or whether it's outside the bag. I've taken my cell phone, put it in a sock, put one of these inside of it, and it keeps your cell phone warm, or any battery powered equipment you have warm, and because the cold will suck your power down like you wouldn't believe. So by keeping that thing a little bit warm, works really, really good. Plus, if they're still warm, you can take them out, put them in your gloves in the morning, and you're good to go. And I've done this too. I've taken it out. It's still warm in the morning. Take it out, put it inside of a jacket or something like that, and it helps keep you warm for a while. Because they say these last about 12 hours. Now, what I would not recommend doing are using some of those fuel-powered warmers, and they're out there. They've got one. I had an old one I had. You used to light a little stick and you put it inside. They get very warm, but once again, you're sleeping in something that's essentially not necessarily flame, but a hot coal. And even though it's enclosed, that's not the best thing to do. The other one is there's a lighter. I've seen, it's not a lighter, but I've seen a warmer that uses lighter fluid, and I definitely would not put that inside of something like this to keep me warm. So you stick with these little chemical warmers. You don't have to worry about any kind of flames or coals, and this is the way to go. Works great. Last thing I want to go over here is clothing, what I wear when I go to sleep. First and foremost, when it's cold outside, I always change clothes. I don't keep on the same clothes I had on during the day, and the reason for that is that your body sweats during the day whether you realize it or not, and moisture gets into the clothes that you've worn all day long. By putting on fresh, dry clothes, you've eliminated any moisture that could be in your clothes, and that's going to be one of the things that are going to help keep you warm. The next thing I do is I like to wear, I've got long johns here that I wear, and these are actually merino wool long johns, and I've got a merino wool shirt, long sleeve shirt that I wear, so that's my long underwear. I like wearing socks, nice good thick socks. Take your socks that you had on, get them off, put on some nice clean dry socks. And finally, I like to wear a hat. Now, I showed you the sleeping bags earlier that had the hoods built into them. If I'm going to use those, I usually won't wear a hat because I found I just get too daggone hot. But if I'm in one that doesn't have a hood, or if I'm going to sleep with my head out of the bag, I will always wear a cap. I like wool, I like merino wool. All of this stuff here is merino wool because it does a really good job of keeping you warm, but it's not itchy and scratchy like regular wool is. But this right here, the system that I showed you, the small tent, the sleeping bags, the double sleeping bags if you need to, or a sleeping bag with a blanket, a very good, appropriate mat underneath your sleeping bag is important because, like as I mentioned in another video I had, your down compresses on the bottom, so you got to have a good pad. So your down bag really only works on the top, and that's why a lot of people use quilts. Then you want to have good clothes that you change into. When you put all of these things together, you'll find that you sleep very, very, very well at night. If you change a couple of them around, you have a big tent, well, you know, you're going to be a little bit cooler. You're going to need to adjust some things. Or if you don't have underwear, well, then you've got to adjust those type of things. Or they only have one bag, well, then you've got to make adjustments to that. But when you use the system that I talked about all together, you will be amazed at how good a night's sleep you get, how nice and warm you are. And when you get a good night's sleep, you wake up the next day, you are ready to go. So that's it. Gadget Man with Discovering in Color. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you out on the trail.